Howdy, peeps. Happy Singles Awareness Day, more commonly known as Valentine's Day. Today, we're going to be talking about ditching the pity party on this special Singles Awareness Day episode of Join the Journey Radio, and it starts right now.
Welcome to the infusion of positive energy into the lives of single Latter-day Saints everywhere. This is Joy in the Journey Radio.
And welcome back, peeps, to the wonderful, splendiferous, joyous episode of Join the Journey Radio. I'm Lance, your host for Join the Journey Radio, and this is episode number 373. I keep my numbers straight here. Singles Awareness Day. If you're viewing the program live, please join the chat. Tell us where you're from. If you're viewing the program later, leave a comment down below and let us know where you're from, because that will help us with the algorithms. So, Single Awareness Day. Actually, the first time I heard that, Valentine's Day is always one of those difficult days for singles who haven't quite given up. Of course, if you've just given up, then you simply just reminded that you gave up, and that's that. But, I don't think that most Latter-day Saint singles have stopped wanting the blessings that they've been wanting ever since they started wanting. And so they keep continuing to want. And it's the continuing to want that continues the want. And they want it to continue, so it continues the want. And now I'm just speaking in idioms, to borrow a line from Monty Python. Yes, so the first time I ever heard that, I was an undergraduate. And so it was like, what? It's like Singles Awareness Day. And there was this whole, gosh, I can't even remember it now. This whole ceremony that went along with it about, I don't even know what it's about. I want to say it was about cows. But I can't even remember what it was about, so don't trust me on that one. Anyway, I've always disliked the idea of calling Valentine's Day Singles Awareness Day ever since I first heard about it, because that's exactly what it is, right? It's one of those holidays that makes you aware of what you don't have and what you can't do. And, of course, as we've talked before here on the program, that's our focus will actually lead to a reality that isn't all that positive. I mean, if you want to depress yourself, just keep focusing, fixated. Just keep your focus fixated on what you can't do and don't have. That's a pretty simple way to go about it, right? So today we're going to talk about ditching that pity party. We're going to ditch the pity party. This is something that a lot of singles get trapped up in. It's, I want to say it's not their fault, and yet at the same time, they're responsible, right? Let me explain. It's not their fault in the sense that they're just playing out habits, right? We all are biologically programmed to operate out of habit. That's how we're designed to function. So, the habits that a lot of singles have is really more negative than positive, because, when something like, Singles Awareness Day comes up, they become more aware of what they don't have, and they focus on what they don't have because that's their habit. They have a habit of focusing on what they don't have. They have a habit of focusing on what they can't do, and therefore, because your focus determines your reality, they have a habit of being in a reality that's not the one they want to be in. And, well, this is not a really good state. So in that sense, it's not their fault because they're just playing out a habit. But in another sense, it is their fault because they actually chose the habit. Now, many people um, don't. Most people don't actually sit down and say, "Gee, I wonder what habit I'm going to adopt for this, and I wonder what habit I'm going to adopt for that, and I wonder what habit I'm going to adopt for, that thing over there, and that one, and that one, and the little itty bitty one in the corner, and that one behind the cobweb." We don't sit down and actually think about this. Most of the time, we just take the habits that were handed to us by our culture, right? So in that sense, again, they're not really to blame, but you chose to just accept that. You chose not to sit down and actually evaluate your assumptions and evaluate the way that you think. You chose not to evaluate your habit and see how effective it's being, and if it's less effective, replace it with something more effective. That's a choice you're making. So, in that sense, it is their fault. Um, but as I explained, so there's more than one way to look at this, right? At the end of the day, I don't think it matters so much what you look at it. Um, I think at the end of the day, what matters is results. People want results. So today we're going to talk about ditching the pity party and exactly how to do that. If you're actually trapped in one of these habits that leads you to have a pity party because it's Singles Awareness Day and you're still single, well, let's talk about how to ditch the pity party. And the way I want to approach this is by focusing on principles, foundational principles that we've talked about time and again on the program. But, for some of you out there, it's maybe the first time you're hearing it. So we'll take it slow. We'll kind of review a lot of stuff. If you've heard this before, it's going to sound like review, but that's okay. Because, excuse me, because review can be a good thing. Okay? We start with this little gem. Your focus determines your reality. So if your reality feels empty, it's because you're focused on what you lack. Because, see, when you focus on there's nothing there, right? You're focusing on what you lack. You're not focused on being single as much as you may think you are. You're focused on being not married. You're focused on what you lack, right? Your focus is not on what you are. You're focused on what you aren't. You're not focused on what you have, which is the opportunities that come with being single. You're focused on what you lack. You're focused on the opportunities you don't have because you're not married. If you want to ditch the pity party, you got to change the focus, right? Stop focusing on what you have. And you'll find that when you start focusing on what you do have and what you can do, then that starts to get the creative juices flowing. That starts to get the innovation flowing. And you start coming with ideas on, what you can do. And at the beginning, it's not going to seem like it's going to solve all your problems. But I guarantee you, if you just keep your focus on what you can do in the place where you are, just be in the place where you are, focus on what you can do in that place, and eventually the way forward will manifest itself. The way forward will never reveal itself to you if you just stay ensconced in the pity party. You know, you gotta change the way you think in order to be able to see. So start focusing on what you have. That's a good first step. Now, some of us feel very much limited by our reality. We may live in a place where, um, there aren't that many LDS singles, and the ones that are here around you, um, well, let's just say, how can I put this diplomatically? Um, Let's just say friendship is the most that can be hoped for. Let's put it that way. um, and so when you're constantly surrounded with limitation, it's easy to focus on that limitation, but that just leads to a reality that feels limited. That feels leads to a reality that feels hopeless, right? Because there's no growth, there's no change. And in that instance, I would suggest you stop focusing on the limitation. Don't focus on what you can't do. Don't focus on what you don't have. Start focusing on what you can do. Start focusing on what you do have. And it may be a far cry from, you know, the characteristic of the life that you want to have, but everybody starts somewhere. And usually it's the place where they are. So, whatever place that is for you, be in that place, right? Now, that brings up certain concerns naturally about the future. If I'm going to be in the place where I am, then how does that ever change? Because you don't see the place where you are ever changing, right? And I will confess that those concerns are very legitimate, they're very real. I'm not saying that you shouldn't recognize them. I'm not suggesting that you wear rose-colored glasses and pretend that everything's, really good, when in fact, there's a lot of not so good things about where you're at right now. What I will say is that you should not become obsessed by the concerns for the future. You should not become obsessed about the limitations that you currently are facing. Keep yourself grounded in first principles of the dating journey. Keep yourself and your attention centered on what you can do to improve yourself. Okay? Let's talk about some of those first principles of the dating journey. It's essential that we understand this. So, in order for this great blessing of, an eternal companion to be, sure in your life and to become realized, you really only need two things. Okay. Um, First, you need to be agreeable enough to the right type of person. Uh, and by the right type of person, I mean the right type for you. So, what we're talking about is a member of the right tribe. Any member of that tribe will bring you maximum happiness. Right? There's no such thing as, um, you know, you know, two people, being sufficiently good for you, but one bringing you more happiness than the other. I don't believe in that. Okay, what I believe is there are people who work and people who don't. And the people who work are members of the right tribe. And any member of that tribe will do. Um, so that's the first thing you need, to be agreeable enough to someone in that tribe. And the second thing you need is to cross paths with a member of that tribe, right? So a member of that tribe can exist, but it's no good if you and that other person do not cross paths, right? You've got to have a meeting, right? You've got to have an interaction. And it's that interaction that starts the relationship. Very often, the relationship will start in the friendship stage. This is the first stage of the dating journey. I know a lot of people like to skip over that and go straight to the actual dating, of which there's two types, by the way. Many people, when they talk about dating, as though it's just one thing, and it's not. Okay, to understand the dating journey, one of the essential first principles is that there's two types of dating. There is casual dating, and there is exclusive dating. I almost said, I get my words confused here. Oh, got some rivets in the brain coming loose. Yeah, so you really only need those two things, right? Be agreeable enough to the right type of person and to cross paths with the right member of that tribe, right? So once you're agreeable enough, right, you can advance to, whichever stage of the dating journey you want. Because remember, the different stages of the dating journey. You've got the friendship stage, you've got the casual dating stage, you've got the exclusive dating stage, and you've got the engagement stage. These are the stages of the dating journey, and each one of these stages has an agreement associated with it. In order to progress to any one stage of the journey, you must have the agreement associated with that stage. If you don't have the agreement associated with that stage, then you don't advance to that stage. It doesn't matter how much you may want it. It doesn't matter how much the other person may want it. An agreement takes the consent of two people. So if you're missing consent from one of those two people, you or the other person, then you and that other person are not progressing together. I, I know this seems like pedantic and asinine, but so many of us are acting with, completely oblivious to these simple, basic truths, and that's why we're going over them today. So, the way you secure an agreement is by being agreeable enough. And that's why I said that, really to get the blessings that we're all looking for of an eternal companion, what you really need is to be agreeable enough to the right type of person for you. Agreeable enough to secure that agreement. Don't need to be perfect. You just need to be good enough to get that agreement. That's why I say you need to be agreeable enough. And then you need to cross paths with that type of person. And honestly, the best way that I know of to go after those two items, okay, is to embrace what we on the program here call a personal ministry. A personal ministry is essentially a form of contribution that a Latter-day Saint single decides to adopt in his or her life, and it uses his or her unique talents, and it allows that person to um, devote themselves to something higher than themselves, devote themselves to something larger than themselves. It allows them to um, basically put their focus into helping other people and making a contribution, right? So one of the real big problems with the pity party is that it's all inwardly focused, right? So the way you get out of that, if you want to ditch the pity party, the way you do it is by switching that focus and turning outward, right? So adopting a personal ministry, this isn't just something to fill the time, right? This is something you're doing with intention. Because look, here's what happens when you adopt a personal ministry. You've got this, this larger something out there that you're devoting yourself to. This, effort of contribution that's helping other people. And by devoting yourself to that, you can't help but become a better person, right? So it actually helps you become more agreeable. Remember, that's the first of the two things that you need to be agreeable enough to the right type of person. Well, engaging in a personal ministry helps you become agreeable enough. And it also helps you cross paths with a member of the right tribe for you, right? Because remember, we're not looking for just anybody. We're looking for somebody who's a member of the right tribe. And the right tribe is, these are the people who are the right type for you, right? And you're more likely to cross paths with that person if you're engaged in a personal ministry. Because no matter what you're doing, right, as far as like devoting yourself to some cause or you're contributing and helping other people, you're not going to be in a vacuum. You're not going to be in a silo. You're going to be interacting with other people at some point along the way. And it's those interactions that provide opportunity for you to cross paths with a member of the right tribe for you. So I really do recommend that all Latter-day Saint singles adopt a personal ministry. Decide, what is it that you should be devoting yourself to, right? Because when you do this, you take the focus off yourself, you take the focus off what you lack, You take the focus of what you don't have and what you can't do because you're devoting yourself to something that is your unique contribution, something that uses your unique talents. And by putting your focus there, you start focusing on what you can do, what you do have. And of course, that's going to lead to a reality of optimism and hope. And you're going to start generating more of this positive energy. See, the personal ministry helps you become agreeable enough to the right type of person. So I really recommend you want to ditch the pity party. This is the way to do it, right? Adopt a personal ministry. Now, you know, the journey that I'm talking about here is not something that happens overnight, right? So you really do need to practice patience. The changes that you want to have happen in your life are not going to happen overnight. More than likely, most of the really big changes that we all dream about having in our lives, they don't come overnight. They come as the accumulation of small gains. Every day you do just a little bit to move yourself just that much closer to your goals and dreams. And looking at that little bit that you put out in one day, isn't going to fill you with a lot of hope. But if you keep putting out that little bit today and tomorrow and the day after and the day after that, then yeah, guess what? You know, you're going to be, in a much better place. So I'm reminded of, James Clear in his book Atomic Habits, where he talks about, what happens if you make just 1% improvement every day. And he actually showed that if you each and every day, 1%'s not a whole lot, right? But if you're 1% better each day, that at the end of the year, you're almost 38 times better than you were at the start of the year. Now, being an engine nerd, I actually had to go crunch the numbers and plot it out, right? So I found something really interesting, right? 1% better every day. I know at the end of the first quarter, which is 3 months, okay, you're only about 2 times better than you were at the start. So in 3 months, you're only twice as good, which, doesn't seem like a lot. At the end of the second quarter, so now you're 6 months out from where you started, you're around, 6-7%, which is actually closer to 6%. So, again, quite a jump from the 2x at the end of the first quarter. But still 6 times better. Hey, that's pretty good. At the end of the third quarter, you jump up to 10x, right? So at the 9 month mark, you're 10 times better than you were when you started. So now you're starting to see some real gains, but I mean, the explosive growth happens in the fourth quarter because you go from 10x to 38x. And again, this is just 1% better every day. The accumulation of small gains can bring about monumental changes. But, the problem most people have is they want everything to be instantaneous. I just want to snap my fingers and have it happen, right? We're the microwave generation, just put it in and have it done. And, a lot of things that are worthwhile in life just don't happen that way. It takes time. And that requires you to practice patience. It also requires you to practice faith. I mean, you have to believe that these small changes you're looking at day after day are going to accumulate into the larger changes that you want in your life. But, it's just what you have to do. Now, when it comes to believing, I go back to the Lego movie.
Believe. I know that sounds like a cat poster, but it's true.
I love that movie. I can't believe it's like 10 years old. I can't believe it. Anyway, you have to believe, right? You have to have faith. I know that sounds like a cat poster, but it's true. It is true, right? It is true. And it can be really hard to hold on to that faith, but that's that that's what the journey requires. And so that's what you have to give. In addition to practicing faith, you also have to practice hope, right? I mean, all along the way, you have to believe that the Lord has good things planned for you, both at some point in the future and all along the way there. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be going through all of this challenge and, as a Latter-day Saint single. And I have faced numerous challenges in my life as a Latter-day Saint single. I've been doing this for quite some time. So, this isn't anything that I say tongue in cheek, right? When I say, I can understand how difficult it can be, I've had, quite a bit of difficulty. And I'm not saying that, you know, I got a monopoly on pain or, challenge or difficulty or anything like that. Sometimes I've seen people um, do ridiculous things like they start comparing pain. Like I've seen divorced singles look down on never married singles because, oh, we have the pain of divorce. We have the grief that follows after divorce. And as if somehow, that makes them better than people who haven't experienced it. And to me, that's just not productive because never married singles have their own grief and their own pain. It's the pain of realizing that this idea they had of marrying someone and having a family, uh, you know, eventually you get to a point where that dream dies and you mourn the death of that dream. And that pain and that grief is real. And I don't think we should be comparing pains with one another because there's nothing productive about it. So what? Right? Everybody hurts, to quote REM. And I got that song in my head. Everybody hurts. Take comfort in your friends. Everybody hurts sometimes. Hold on. And that's really what you got to do. You got to hold on, right? Instead of comparing pains, how about we just reach out and help one another because we're all in pain, right? So let's do that, right? So, yes, you need a personal ministry to ditch the pity party. Practice patience, practice faith, practice hope. Um, More than anything, though, I think what you really need is to do the work. You need to do the work. Nothing will change in your life if you don't change you. You know, one of the things I see, a lot of LDS singles doing, and it's perfectly normal, right? This is less of a critique and more of an observation of normality. It's perfectly normal for somebody who's in a bad situation to want to just sit there and hope that time heals the wound, right? That everything's just going to get better if you just, let things alone. And there's this natural tendency not to do the work, right? Because we all just want to be loved for who we are. It's like, why should I have to improve myself? Why should I have to change? Why can't I be loved for who I am now? Um, and the answer is quite simple. It goes back to that, those basic principles of the dating journey we were talking about earlier. In order to advance to any stage of the dating journey, you have to secure the agreement connected with that stage. If you don't have that agreement connected with that stage, you don't progress to that stage. That's just the way it works. Those are the rules of the game, so to speak. Those are the rules. And you could pretend you're living in a universe where it works differently, but the reality is those are the rules and that's how things play out. So, if you want to progress to a certain state, you have to secure the agreement. And how do you secure any agreement in any context? It's by being agreeable enough. So, you have to do the work, because if you're not progressing that stage that you want to progress to because you're not securing the agreement, and you're not securing the agreement because you're not agreeable enough, then obviously you need to change you to become agreeable enough so you can get the agreement you need so you can progress to the stage of the dating journey you want to progress to. Just simple logic, right? But there's so many of us who just don't want to do the work. I want to be loved for who I am. Yeah, well, that's, for most people who are saying that, they're just intellectually lazy. And they just don't want to sit down and do the work to make themselves a better self. They don't want to make them better them. They want to just stay as they are and have be carried blissfully away into happily ever after. And life doesn't work that way. That's why I say, more than anything, you really need to do the work. And the work involves becoming more and more agreeable. But again, the personal ministry helps with that. It helps so much with that. um, so yes, let's ditch the pity party, right? Adopt a personal ministry and start focusing your attention on that unique form of contribution that will put your dent in the universe, that will help other people, that will, give more meaning to your life and help you to fulfill your potential. You the Lord has given every one of us talents, and He didn't give us these talents so that we could just kind of keep them to ourselves. I mean, go back to the parable of the talents in the New Testament. I mean, the servant who had 10 talents, there's a servant who servant had 5 talents, servant who had 2 talents, servant who had 1 talent, right? And the first two increased the number of talents they had because they sat down and they did the work, right? And because they improved their situation, they did the work, improved their situation, and even though their situations were different, right? They had different number of talents, but they each did what they could with what they had. The one that had more did more. The one that had less did less. But they both did all they could do. And that's the difference, between them and, the last servant who had just 1 talent and went and hid it away. Didn't use it to improve his state, didn't use it to improve anybody else's life. And, the Lord cast out that wicked servant for his wickedness in withholding his talent. Well, all of us have been given talents. And it's not just to be they're stagnant, it's so that we can adopt a personal ministry, so that we can apply those talents for the good of other people and help them along in their journey. And in so doing, you become helped in your journey. You fulfill your potential. You fulfill your purpose here on this earth. That's why you have those talents, to help you fulfill that purpose. So think about the talents that you've been given. Think about your patriarchal blessing. You don't have one, go get one. Think about the promises you've made in the covenants and baptism in the temple. Think about all of this, partner with the Lord, and figure out what your personal ministry needs to be. And then just start devoting yourself to that. Start doing that. I think a lot of us need to spend less time in hobbies and pastimes and more time in contribution. There's so much need in this world, and we each have the ability to make a positive change in the place that we are around us. We need to be busy doing that work. And in so doing, we become better, we become more agreeable, so we're more likely to, be agreeable enough to that person when we cross paths with that person. And devoting ourselves to personal ministry helps us cross paths with that quality person. Because if you're engaged in a quality practice, which is giving of yourself, devoting yourself to other people, making a contribution that makes your little part of the world a better place, right? You're going to cross paths with other people who are of that mindset. That's why I say your probability of meeting a member of that right tribe for you and crossing paths with that person is substantially increased by adopting a personal ministry, right? So here's the thing. You want to ditch the pity party? Get off your bum and get to work. Partner with the Lord, decide what your personal ministry needs to be, and just go gangbusters on it. Get to work. I'm reminded of a verse from Psalms, a book of Psalms in the Old Testament, Psalm 119, 105. It reads, "Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." You want to see the way ahead? You want to see, where you should be stepping out? Partner with the Lord. Partner with the Lord. Study His Word. Listen for His voice. He will show you the way you need to go. Modern-day prophets and apostles have consistently counseled members of the church to spend time regularly in temple service. And certainly we heard a lot about the temple this last conference. So seek direction in the temple. Go to the temple and seek direction there. Ultimately, the Lord knows what changes you need to make in you so that the blessings He wants you to have will more easily come to you. So partner with Him, include Him in that process of discovery. And sometimes, the only way you're going to know what you should be doing is if you just go out and start doing something. When you find your personal ministry, you'll know it, right? Because you'll get this feeling like hand in glove. And, working on your personal ministry will light you up. You feel so much energy, motivation, optimism. You'll feel such a sense of meaning and purpose when you engage in it. When you find the right one for you, you will know, right? And sometimes you just have to just get out and start doing things, and eventually you'll stumble upon it, right? So, partner with the Lord. He'll help you. He'll help you stumble into the right place. So, again, the Lord knows what changes you need to make. He knows the work you need to do. So partner with Him. Let Him help you, come to the place where you need to be. So, in conclusion, if you want to ditch the pity party, get off your bum and get to work. Quit feeling sorry for yourself. Get up and do something. And, reach for that better you. Reach for that more positive you. Reach for that more optimistic you. Never surrender. And just keep at it. It can be tough. It can be rough. But at the end of the day, when the going gets rough, the tough get going. That's the old expression says. They get up and they do stuff. They get to work. And so, that's what I recommend. You want to ditch the pity party? Get to work. I'm reminded of something that President Hinckley's father told him when he was on his mission. President Hinckley got to a point in his mission where he was very discouraged, very disappointed, and he wanted to come home. And so, he relayed his feelings in a letter to his father. And of course, back in those days, early 20th century, I'm not talking about email or text, like we have today, right? You've got the mail system, and the mail was typically transported by boat across the ocean. So it took a while for the letter to get home, and then it took a while for the reply to reach President Hinckley. But eventually he got a uh, a reply from his father, and it basically said, "I received your letter of such and such date. I have only one thing to suggest to you. Forget yourself and go to work. Forget yourself and go to work." The problem with the pity party is you're focused on you and what you don't have and what you can't do. And the way to get out of that is to reverse that. Where you want to get out of it, the way to reverse it is don't focus on you, focus on other people. And don't focus on what you can't do and don't have. Focus on what you can do and what you do have. That personal ministry will help you to keep that focus outward on other people and focused on what you can do and focused on what you do have. And your focus creates your reality. So with that focus, you're going to have a reality of optimism and hopefulness, and you're going to feel more faith that the Lord will help you, and you're going to feel more of His love. You'll be more open to feel more of His love. That will bring joy to you. So even though, the actual, fundamental reality of your situation hasn't changed, you can still be just as single, but you're going to feel a whole lot better about your situation if you just turn things around. Singles Awareness Day is usually a day in which you are aware of what you lack because you're single. Turn that around and make Singles Awareness Day the day you realize what you have and what you can do because you're single. There's so many opportunities. We got to quit looking at singleness as something to escape from and start looking at it as something to embrace. You're running the wrong way. You got to go back the other way and start embracing the reality of where you are, embracing the opportunities that reality provides, and then you'll open the door to receive more joy in your journey. Well, that's all we got for this episode of Join the Journey Radio. Just no one in the chat, so I want to thank all of you for joining in, though. If you have something you'd like to say about what we've discussed today, please leave a comment down below. If you have a topic or a question you'd like us to see addressed, then we're here to help. Join the Journey Radio exists to help Latter-day Saint singles thrive in their single years. So please leave a comment down below and tell us how we can help. If there's something we can do to help you overcome the challenges of LDS singles life, then yeah, you got it. Leave a comment down below. The other thing you can do is go to our website, jointhejourneyradio.com, and there on the contact page, you'll find a form that you could submit to send us a message. That also works as well. So either way you're comfortable with, we're good with. But as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our content that you find helpful, because that helps the algorithm push our content out to other Latter-day Saint singles who can be helped by our content. And so you're helping other people as well as us by liking, subscribing, and sharing our content. So, let's get those algorithms working in our favor. So until next time, this is your host. I'm wishing you well, and ditch that pity party. And I'll see you here next week for another wonderful, exciting episode of Join the Journey Radio. So until then, this is your host reminding you there is joy to be had all along your journey. So take that joy and journey on.